especially since everyone's got smartphones, like even out in public, just be like, be a good person and you don't have anything to worry about.
Yes, right.
But yeah, so anyways, this is also technical and useful, and that's also going to be incredibly important to be recorded. And I think that's probably the most important part. Yeah. Well,
Okay,
I
so
would
I would just wanted to share my agenda for today's call.
okay.
So in the project's kickoff meeting, we were given a little brief about the requirements, and we were
Mhm.
asked to read the white paper to come, like to be prepared with that white paper with that reading,
Mhm.
and then ask questions in like tomorrow's Friday meeting. And for for this particular meeting, I was looking for to understand the expectations you have in terms of managing and working on those collaboration tools you shared with us,
Okay.
the three of them. So how those tools need to be managed and what will be the scope.
Cool. First, can you enable screen sharing?
Oh. Sorry for that. Now you can try.
Cool. All right, and this will be wanting my second screen here. I have three screens, so I got to make sure I choose the right one. Cool. So I've got a few different things that I run through, and so my expectations. The most important one I find for me would be the Jira board, and so this is the one that will let you guys start building up tasks on a backlog. I just threw together some example tasks and how you can kind of show to set things up, to set up sprints, to use those. So that way it's like you can have your issue tracking. It's really easy to look and say, hey, this is what we were working on. This is what needs to get done. I can jump in and I can look at it, and you guys don't even need to like contact me on it, because I know there's going to be points where we're going to be doing code reviews. And making sure like things are being addressed as they should, and this will just keep some administrative level of discussion that wouldn't really need to be worried about too much, because I can see where the progress is at, and we can have more productive targeted discussions when those come around, which we're probably going to cover a lot more of those administrative details tomorrow on when we want to have those schedules set, when we're going to go and do code reviews, whether we want to do things as a whole team, individual elements, etc. I think
Yeah, we
tomorrow would
still
be
need
great.
to frame the product, is it like the roadmap thing? It's still not framed yet. So how high level the details should be there in the Jira board, and will you be the person managing this, or I am also expected to do something on that?
So I know you're going to be doing all of like the main managing for your team.
Yes.
Like my management for you guys is not going to be so much managing you, but kind of like assisting as needed. So if there's going to be questions involving things like you're getting stuck on trying to get something working for AWS, you need to get some tech help. I'm your first go-to guy for that. If there's going to be architectural questions on how some things should be implemented, I'd be a good go-to for that. I'm essentially like your tech mentor for a lot of this process, is how I've kind of been hearing and seeing a lot of it. And the most of the actual implementation, managing the group, handling all that's going to be you. I'm just setting up some tools, giving some good general what I envision we could be needing and how it would be implemented. Um, and you guys can modify as much as you want for it. But I would need to just be reviewing and making sure it's like, hey, what we're doing, does it make sense? Is it secure? Will it like work based off of any practical experience that I've got that could be applied to it? But the majority of a lot of this is going to be handled by you guys.
Got it.
Uh, so
But
this tool, so oh so this tool Jira is really great for issue tracking and planning. And so making issues on it is as simple as creating an issue. You can set tasks, bugs, we can create additional issue types as needed. And so um when you make a task, the task can then get assigned to different people current and have its progress set. So right now, this one's a to do. If I want to delete one, so we've got the bug. So when you make a task, you can see that's assigned as a bug. You can add things called epics to it. Epics are kind of like little story items that will help further organize. So if you want to set up CI/CD, you know, I made an example for that continuous integration, continuous deployment, stuff for the front end, API, database. If you want to make more, you can always just open up the Epic panel, and that should let you create and add new ones. And so you can assign them. And so if I want to delete a task or remove it, you can always just go to the little options, delete a task. Task can have parents and children, and that's something I'll get into in a minute. But so that's how you can handle some tasks. And so tasks you build into a backlog. These are all the things that you need to get done. The backlog, you would move stuff from your backlog to a sprint. So I set a sprint here that I was going to use for myself to add new team members to Jira, which we've done yesterday. So let's actually go to the sprint board. It's a lot clearer here. So when you finish tasks, you can adjust to where they're at. Right now, we're doing the orientation. I'll say that's in progress. We added new team members. That's done. When you move it, it could automatically update that status where you saw I was clicking earlier in the backlog manually doing it. You can get a list of all of your current sprint tasks. So I know where your current focus is. You know where your team member's current focus is. You can see whether something's in progress, whether it's done. If you want to add more, toss in a new one. And we can say this one is in, let's see,
Peer review or something?
Review. Actually, review is one I would like to have. So when you're done with something, you can first move it to review, and then once it's in review, like you can put something there if you need it to be like code reviewed right there, and then I can go through and know it's like, hey, so we've got these tasks done. I know I need to go through and review it before we move it to the done tab. So we can add some. Well, actually, that should probably be all that we'd really need. And so once it's done, you can move it there. And so this sprint has 0 days remaining because I'd scheduled it originally to be 26 August to 2 September. But that was a demo point. So once I finish the sprint, everything that's in done, yay, done, complete sprint. Now the board is empty, and I can now start planning in for the next one, add new stuff, and I'd want to update the time frame for this one. So this one we can set as a 2-week sprint going from today is what, the 8th? The 8th to 2 weeks from there. Granted, I'm not going to start this because at this point it's going to be you guys taking over this board, filling in tasks. If I catch anything that needs to be added, I can add some tasks there and let you know if you need to divvy out responsibilities. Generally, I would expect that I would just probably have that discussion with you. And if you want to, and then you guys can set up that tasks however you want and organize it. I don't want to be too hands-on with your team because I'm tracking that it is your team and you're managing it. That was my understanding. So I don't want to take that away from you.
But I'll definitely need your help in
Yep.
understanding few things. So I'll appreciate that kind of help.
Yeah.
Because this is the first time I'm acting as a project manager for a team. So what we have is we have a team with from 2 different programs within CMU. So I am from the software management program, and rest of the 4 team members who will be working technically on this project are from the INI program. So that's how things will be. So I'll be there for the communication and management kind of a stuff. All the technical hands-on they will be doing. So
yeah. Okay. So yeah. If whatever assistance is ever needed from me, I am an easy email, or when I don't know if you sent the Slack invite yet for your.
I'm just in the progress of doing that.
Yeah. So when you get the Slack channel set up, I should hopefully be an easy Slack ping away. I got to figure out working between multiple different Slack groups. My philosophy is always like, yeah, I just have the one I need like immediately right here on like my phone. And so it would just automatically like go to, yeah, I'm in Slack Gizmo. So getting pings between different groups. Well, it's easy enough to change between them. I've got the different workspaces, so should be fine.
I have
That's what
already
I tell
set up a
myself.
workspace for this project, and in
I
there
don't.
I have like a
Oh,
channel.
you do, or
I have created one for the team.
okay, yeah. So just send me an invite for that.
I have
And
like two different channels in there. One is for the internal team discussions, and one there will be for the Slack and as well as the CMU team for the discussions.
what's
I
errors?
still have
I'll deal
to
with
share an invite with you guys. I'll be doing just a
share.
God.
Sorry, cut out a little bit. Share which part?
Still have to share the invites for the Slack channel. I'll do it just after.
Okay.
Yeah. I
All
have a
right.
question like the sprint is to be ideally for 2 weeks. What would you suggest?
So 2 weeks is generally the standard amount of time for each sprint. And so when you go through a sprint, then you can update that board when you hit. So like say if you go to a sprint, so we'll leave this as a 2 through 9. It's fine. So say we start a sprint here, start date's 9/8, ends 9/9, and I've got an issue to do. I change it to progress. After your time is up for the sprint, if you run complete sprint on it and the task is open and not done, it will move it automatically to the next sprint. So when I complete the sprint here, you see the task is still there. So essentially, the completing it every 2 weeks allows you to clear stuff that's done, and you can add on to new things to that sprint that you might be targeting to have done. And so the sprint is just essentially letting you set a much smaller set of tasks, because when you start really adding up all the tasks that you're going to need for this, the backlog spanned quite incredibly massively. And to show you what that looks like, I wouldn't want the PV Jira board. I want my Jira board. Oh God. So welcome to we didn't have our sprint meeting, so things are a little bit behind here. Stuff needs to be cleaned up on it, but we've got a lot of the work that Mitchell's on, the work that Jimmy's on, what I'm currently in progress on for setting up scripts. I know I cleaned up some stuff, but since I was out a lot last week, I need to start moving some tasks back up here for my stuff. And if we go down to our backlog, past the issues on here, we've got only 48 listed, which is cool. We're doing good. We're doing good. So yeah, those can get quite fun. And within tasks, there's another fun thing that you can do, which is create child issues and subtasks. So as you've seen, I've added, sure, this might be one in progress task. I'll add stuff that I can list as completed, and then I'll get sub child issues that also need to be completed and done. So things can get advanced pretty quickly.
So these child are in the task, like the user story. We have
Yeah.
epic, and in an epic we have user story, and in that user story we have subtasks, right?
Yeah, so you can create subtasks. To make a subtask, you would want to go to like maybe the regular backlog side, and when you access the task from the backlog and you get the side menu, you can select add epic, which the fact I didn't do that was that's a bad on me. This should be where's GridLab D? No, it's high pass, of course. High pass and GridLab D are the same thing yet different, but it's high pass. So I'd set it to like high pass is that project. So we use epics for different projects. You guys aren't dealing with different projects, so you can use it, and that's why I set it up to be a more local scope for the epics, for the front end elements versus the API elements. Kind of set up a little bit of differentiation between those. And creating the child issue would be just using this little child issue button here. And so then I could type in something here. This is a child, and then hit create. I'm not going to actually execute on that because this is my official board. So I try and keep my official board as clean as possible, at least for the stuff that I put in and manage there. And so we've got, well, the open FIDO stuff's coming to an end and we don't have funding for it anymore. So I may as well just kind of kill off and clean off all of those. Focusing on the high pass stuff. Some of the PT Insight stuff. I gotta add the CVX group stuff. Oh boy.
That like different projects.
So yeah, so yeah, I've got work across different projects. I'm doing stuff with Bennett for PV Insight, not the PV Validation Hub. That's what I'm going to be helping you guys with. I've got stuff for High Pass Grid Lab D, which is another major project. I've got work I've been doing for Open FIDO, where I'm going to be, the stuff I've got left for it that I've got to do is essentially going to be assembling all the documentation and putting it into as much of a human readable format as possible. I'm going to be getting to work on some stuff with tests. I'm going to be helping David with some of his CMU teams as well.
There are 4 teams, I guess.
Huh?
The test, there are 4 teams, if I'm not wrong. For the test project?
I believe so. I know there's 3 teams that David is involved with there, and I'm going to be essentially helping him so he doesn't get utterly annihilated from overextending his management there. And so I've got those, and then I'm pretty sure there's other stuff that I've let slip for my brain and I'll regret later. That's a problem for future me.
Yeah, I also wanted to know about the detailed task distribution. So what we have is currently we have a Trello board for our team's tasks, like in terms of our assignments or what we need to deliver to Slack in the weekly meetings and stuff. So we have one that board. And another this Jira, if I talk about, so I can keep the scope for this Jira board to be highly technical and what all tasks we need to perform in order to deliver the final.
Okay, so you're going to be using primarily a Trello board, and you'd be using Jira then for technical, or would you prefer to just be using a Trello board?
No, I think Trello will be more on the internal side, like in terms of the assignments we have and we need to perform as a team for the CMU side for this course, and the Jira board could be highly focused towards the validation hub tasks, what all technical tasks we need to do and stuff.
Okay, yeah. So if I could also get an invite to the Trello board as well, then would be good. But that is a good delineation. I do like that.
Sure, I can send you the invite for that too.
Cool.
And one another question I had was, is there an expectation for us to perform all the sprint activities as well? Like in an ideal scenario, we have retrospective and sprint planning. Sprint planning could be done in a weekly meeting, which we usually have on Fridays.
Yeah, so the sprint meetings, let's just set this up real quick because I know there's probably gonna be some questions there. So I know we're gonna have our sprint meetings. Generally, we can run it. My plan is to try and run it like we do a regular software engineering team. So we can do a lot of board updates during that sprint meeting, where we discuss the tasks, what's been done, what needs to be done, any blockers, that kind of stuff that needs to be worked on. We can cover a lot of those during our sprint meetings.
And the meetings could be the Friday, alternate Fridays, or you want me to block another slot for that?
So the Friday meetings is the Friday. All right. So I know that there was a tracking of Friday meetings. I know we've got the one tomorrow that's with Bennett. Yeah. And if that is our scheduled standardized meeting, I know he's got his initial schedule for a lot of his objectives. We can discuss some more of that there with him, whether we're going to differentiate these entirely, if there's going to be a shared time slot. Because I'm not sure entirely what everything he would want out of them. For this project, I view myself a lot more as on the technical mentor side. Bennett is our main. You could say he's like the user we're building the application for. So his opinion is a very important one, that we're going in the right direction. We want to make him happy, that we're making a good application for him. So if he wants to be involved on some of the schedules, any of that, I'd like to have him there for when we officialize that discussion, so that way he's not going to be entirely in the dark on, like, he knows that if he wants to reach out to me on a Tuesday, that if Tuesdays when we've had our meetings, I'd have an answer for him. Otherwise, it'd be like, hey, Bennett, remember we said we're going to do everything on Fridays or something, you know? So I'd like to set up those administrative plans and everything tomorrow when we've got him available.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So we can keep that for tomorrow's agenda.
Yeah.
And yes, for the Jira thing, I'm done with my questions for now.
Cool. All right. So this here that I've got on Figma, this is all subject to change, and it's up to you guys if you want to use Figma or not. It's just something that I've used before. It's particularly useful in setting up architectures and in designing front end elements. So a little bit of background about myself. I'm originally a front end engineer. That's what I got a lot of my education in. So most of my stuff is a little focused in that area. But essentially, when I was looking at this project and I was setting up some plans, the architecture part of it, geez, there's like no midterm here between, let's go for, can I go for like 35%? That's somewhat better. Okay. And so essentially what I'm looking at is we have a full stack application that we're going to be building that is going to be utilizing Amazon Web Services. So I will need to create AWS users with permissions designated for you and any of the team members that will be working on the AWS side of things. And so what this is going to entail is essentially I've built for the flow of information here. So when a user comes in to utilize our application to go to the front end, we can utilize one of AWS's load balancers to essentially spread out the incoming traffic to as many front end instances as we would need. So depending on the efficiency and quality of the front end, it can support several users at a time, potentially for one. But if you got too many users on a single instance, you could crash that front end. I've had some fun doing that before. I love breaking things. And so we'll go to our front end. Our front end is going to be essentially our public facing element. So if you want to go to, like, say, pvvalidationhub.com, we can set the domain for it. We can get all of that stuff established to make it a easily reachable front page. We are going to want to make sure we do get a domain name set up for it. And that's something that I might need to do a little bit of looking into on because I know I would probably need to get with Bennett and Karen or Pamela on making sure we get our funding and all of that taken care of to pay for that. But we are going to want to get a domain name set up. You can probably talk with Bennett on what he wants to call it because it's his thing. So from our front end, this is where we're going to have a lot of security setups going on. So when users come in, we're going to want to make sure that our front end will have set up a general available element that you come in, you've got your classic sign-in page. You might be able to glance around at stuff. have some limited feature work that you might be able to do while you're a non-logged in, non-authenticated user, but the majority of our functionality will be locked behind an authenticated user. And so we're going to essentially then go from our front end to our API. That's just our main access point. Our API is going to handle a lot of processing here. So when a user tries to sign in, there's going to be communication between the front end and API. It's like, hey, you know, is this a valid user? The API will then route any sign-in request to the database, pass it back. And then if they're authenticated, we need to determine how we want to maintain the authentication. Do we intend to use a session cookie? Do we intend to utilize an alternative method? Do we want them to store something to local storage? How we do that, up to us. But we're going to want to maintain a level of security. And while Bennett hasn't necessarily stated this, based off of my technical knowledge, I would want absolutely password hashing, password salts, and no text password saved onto our database. That is the bare minimum of security requirements there. And so once users are validated and they can get access to the rest of the functionality, then they're going to want to be able to create and set up essentially a system for running some of their different PV projects. And so what we're going to need to then do is that when they submit a project from, like, say, their GitHub, that they're going to want to run against a series of tests that we're going to have stored and hidden from them. We're going to then have the front end, when it then gets those tests to pass in, we're going to need to be able to scan the code they have, even in a general fashion, to find anything that they're doing that would be essentially against that could be risky stuff, that would be putting in security holes, that kind of stuff, where they might try and do something malicious with our systems. We need to be able to scan anything they submit. And if it passes that, we can essentially then store and save their algorithms that they want to test and utilize in our system. Those algorithms, when they're going to run, and this is where things are going to get fun, and this is going to be the real meat and potatoes of this this application, is going to be the containerization system and running of those algorithms. So when we get them and a user wants to run their algorithm, we can have potentially dozens of users at the same time trying to run algorithms. So scaling that's going to be fun. We're going to have a lot of fun on this project on that one. We're going to want to essentially be able to pull the algorithms from the database based off of which users need them, make sure they route to the correct user who's at the correct instance at the correct time. And it's going to balance them out into a number of different containers as necessary. Each of these containers are essentially going to be like cut off from as much of reality as possible, except for a whitelisted set of connections, because there are some there's a lot of .gov sites and .org sites that are generally good. We're going to need to have a whitelist of accepted websites that will allow these containers to be able to connect to for their algorithms if they need outside data. And we're going to essentially run their algorithms here. It's going to get a result. We can save that result then in our database and return the results to the user. And so the containerization system, I figure, would be probably one of the best ways to do it. Now, are there other ways to do it? Quite likely. This is just the one I was able to figure out in the amount of time since I was given the project to look at and figure out how to best help you guys get started. So I will gladly admit I have spent a day on this.
Wow.
So
No, it's really helpful. I'm getting a really good clear picture for this. But yeah, my engineering team would be more like expert in this. I'm hoping that they'll be asking a lot of questions on that tomorrow.
I do hope there will be a great many questions, and as much details as we can work on and sort out, the better in getting this rolling. This was just my initial all right, if I needed to do this, how would I do it? And I just put together everything I knew I could figure out. Oh, one other thing, I did mark backup here, and that's because backups are incredibly important. And I also will guaranteed expect that we'll have backups of everything.
Yes.
But yeah, and so this is just like, what do we need? What are the basics? Let's get it out and ready. So that way it's like, if you guys need to have an idea of how to start, we can start from here. We can ask questions, build out, adjust as needed.
Sure.
Uh,
So the screens for the front end is still on us, right? We still need to brainstorm like what all screens would be there for a user. Like we have three different kind of users. One is
yeah.
general user, will be the developer, then the
Mhm.
admins, and then the industry users.
Yeah. So
How
making
the
stuff like
usability
that.
for them would be on the application, it still needs to be identified, right? In
Mhm.
terms of the screens.
Yeah. And so the way stuff, let's see if I still have access to some of my old groups for Figma. Can I
I
go
can see
to
like
just like,
we are 2 minutes over, so I hope you are okay with the extension, right?
oh, yes, I'm good. We've got a happy hour coming up. So essentially, I figured if we had to run over, that'd be fine. Can I go to here? This is an old group, but um stuff we've done for, no, don't give me widgets. I have some friends who are really good at front end design, and so when we did our Figma designs for making a job application website,
Mhm.
uh, zoom in, we used Figma to essentially build out different. Come on, let me move on this. What is going on here? Can I move? There we go.
Figma sometimes
Cool.
we trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, job site. So this was back when I was doing some stuff as part of a school team essentially. And so we would set up for both mobile view and our desktop views for the site. And so we have each of our different routes that you could go to set up. And so we had a lot of different options based on whether or not you were signed in for a job site specifically. We wanted people to be able to see jobs, but then if you were applying, you need to be like, hey, you need to sign up with our website in order to be able to utilize all these services. And so we can utilize Figma. We can set up a lot more of how we want the front end elements to look. I would like to discuss with Bennett what he wants to see on that. As I may have mentioned before a couple times, I am tech guy. I'm not the, hey, this
But
is
are
the front
fine.
end I'd be satisfied with seeing. It's not making me happy on the front end. It's what Bennett would like to see. And so this is a good example of how we can make front ends look. For this example, he gave me a couple examples of kind of what he was basing things off of. And we'll go through it all together on Friday so we can all be on the same page with that. So I don't want to go and have a game of telephone where I'm trying to remember what Bennett told me 2 weeks ago, and then trying to pass that on now. So we'll just go over with him tomorrow. Once we kind of get things satisfied and signed off on with him, and we can go from there. So when we do want to make the front end, I would like us to try and do something similar to this, where we can kind of create a sketch essentially of what we want it to look like. And then we can present that to him. And if he's happy with it, we'll code it and make it happen. And we can go from
We can
there.
start with a wireframe.
Start with which part?
With a wireframe?
Yeah, wireframe. Yeah, exactly. So that's all this is pretty much a kind of wireframe.
But it's really
So
high fidelity.
this
It looks very
Quentin is a very special man. You can see he's the one who let's see. Yeah, they show when he was showing the users, Quentin's the guy, he put together most of this part. I did a lot of the security elements for the website, and that was a lot of fun. I used Passport primarily because it offered a lot of the elements that I wanted. I could get password hashes, password salting. I could take the values that I could produce and authenticate and secure with it and utilize that to put protections on the different routes. So if we wanted to have, I don't know if this is even still up. I think we took the site down after we finished making it and we're cleared and good to go, but I could probably make it run again if I wanted to. Nah, I'm not going to do that. That's way too much. But yeah, so I know Passport's a pretty good application that can be used for a lot of that.
I
So
remember
we don't
when I shared, like, we can look into Kaggle as well to in terms of the interface, how the algorithms will be saved and the data set kind of stuff. Not
Yeah.
sure if I'm right on that.
And so that's a lot of stuff that we can work out, especially once we get the rest of the team involved as well.
Yes.
And so this was just a nice little example of what we can do with Figma, what my teams have done before that I've worked with. I know I helped Quentin also go through a lot of the review on this, but yeah, he spent at least 3 days going incredibly OCD on it. He was a very special, very focused guy, and there's a reason he has a job at Amazon for over 180 grand a year. So
Oh.
yeah.
Yeah, hopefully we'll be
So
able to like scope down the
yeah.
requirements tomorrow.
Yeah, so we can cover a lot more of the requirements. I don't expect us to make anything as high def as Quentin did. But I do expect us to a certain extent to make a wireframe that would be representative of what we would want our front end and its interactions to look like.
Sounds
Yeah, cool. And
Also, I
so
read something on the additional consideration while I was going through the board. So is there
yeah.
something you want to highlight there as well?
So for
There
our
was
additional
documentation stuff over there. 1 point for documentation is required for all.
so things.
Sorry, your voice is cracking. Some kind of a network issue.
Cool. So am I coming in clear? There we are.
Better,
All
but
right. So there are a couple things. Yes.
your connection was
Okay.
lost.
Cool. So there are a couple things. All right. So clearly my voice isn't coming through because the moment I started something else coming, I'm just like, wait, what? What? I think we're going back and forth here.
Yes.
Okay.
Not,
So
yeah.
So what I'm trying to focus on most for some of this, I know that documentation is very important in aspects for, especially once developers leave an area, somebody has to maintain it after. So I'm requiring essential documentation is done for everything that we have running. Now how that documentation gets done is something we can open and discuss. I know one method that we use, we've got a wiki page that we can have on any of our repositories. We dedicate that for development. There's also MD files that you can use within a repository, similar to so let's say if we go to, like, I know I've done a little bit of stuff here. Clearly the connection's on my end because this is loading so slow. And so we'd have like a readme, and this is for a lot of users to get started, right? And so you have a different stuff you could have for the readme. Fun thing, readmes. I think I got it going quite here. Oh my god, it is my internet. All right. But if we go to like a different page and there's a readme in here, or if there's an MD documentation, it can then show that up on the bottom. It's not showing it here. one, but if we did, we'd be able to put like on the top page of the repository. Now, the repositories also have a wiki page on them, and one day this will load. And so depending on how you want to use and set up the wiki page, you can build multiple different pages for some document on it to explain some things that you've got and how they work. So whether we want to have the readmes be for user docs, or if we want to have the wiki be for user docs, or if you want to have the wiki be developer docs, that's something we can officialize with Bennett tomorrow. But the thing that matters most for me is that we do have that documentation there. And also let them know to do not shy away from code comments. I love comments in code because code comments can make it so when you look at something, you don't cry.
Yes.
So if I go to let's go down here and open the client. Let's look at there's something fun with being containers. I hate how this is loading so slow now. Okay. Let me go down to pipelines.
And do we
And
have
then
like
we can go down to
standard
say
starter
like
code for us?
say again?
Do we have a starter code for this
create
project?
so we've got a starting repository. We don't have starter code. So what I've got here is I'm just showing an example of like what we can get for code comments. So like for the front end, when you've got a bunch of elements, important ways that you can have some of your documentation. So if we're looking at something, you can use a variety of things to try and make it clear what you're doing, right? Clear naming is something that, like when I go through code reviews, they're going to want to know this, but I'm going to be looking for clear names. If I look at something and I'm like, hey, this is called pipeline selector. It's a selector for pipelines. You look at it, you want to make it dumb and obvious what it's for. I'm a huge fan of that. I know there's a lot of other developers who are all about let's make it a single line as efficient as possible. But if you write it that way and you come back to it a month later and you're like, what on earth does this do? That's not something I'm a big fan of. I like maintainable code. And if you can look at it and you know what you're doing with it and you don't even need a comment to explain it, that's honestly the best in my opinion.
Yes, that's practice to follow.
But that's just a little, yeah. Now for the repository that we've got, go to PV validation hub here. So we don't have my connect unstable. I get it. Pages are running so slowly. I can't miss how unstable my internet connection is. So pretty much starting in here. It's a full stack project. So everything that we're going to be building. That gives leeway and also emphasizes the importance of our design phase. Because whatever decisions we're going to make now, we're going to want to be as thought out and as well planned as possible. Because once we get later into the project, we're not going to have an easy time changing them. So that's why in some of my considerations, like I set up some basics here for getting started. So GitHub Actions, I've done a lot of work with that. If we've got questions on how we can use it for testing, for other development purposes, I've mixed in a couple examples for how we can use GitHub Actions. If you want to use Python, if you want to use other elements, you can do so. You can run them on Windows. You can have ones that will run on Ubuntu or Mac OS. I tried to make both learning and examples mixed as much together as possible. And how to use GitHub Actions. This runs multiple commands. And so you can see, we've got a bar. You can run echoes, different commands, that kind of stuff. I'm not sure how much you guys might know, how much you might not know. So we'll also discuss and sort that out on how much I would have to be involved. I do presume that there is a fair amount of knowledge on your part. So I don't want to I think I'd like to figure out where everyone's comfort level is at. That's one of my objectives. And so that's we're essentially starting from scratch here, and so that's why I've got a variety of things for our additional considerations as well. So we've got we want to use IAC, which is internet, or not internet. Infrastructure is the word I wanted. Infrastructure as code. That's a very, very important concept, particularly for once you guys get out of college, start getting into a lot of the bigger careers. All the guys who have been on the technical side will definitely probably have heard this a few times. Because that's essentially, you can utilize code to set up how to build things. So there's a few different ways of whether you want to use AWS CloudFormation, Terraform. Those are like specific things. So AWS CloudFormation is a system where you can essentially write AWS styled code. I think they're a YAML syntax based one that can then be used to essentially take your application that you've built on, say, the GitHub repo, and with like a command or two, you can deploy the entire thing onto AWS. Then there's Terraform. That's one that we've used for OpenFido. The code that we have is a little antiquated, but still works. And it is extremely complex and convoluted, and the documentation on it is horrible. And the fact I had to pick that up and make it work from all that horrible non-existent documentation was infuriating. So let me reemphasize, let's leave documentation for our future maintainers, because if I'm gone and you guys are gone one day and somebody has to come and maintain this that we're building, we're going to want to be kind to them.
Yes.
And give them something to work with. That way they're not coming in blind and being like, what is this wizardry? I ask myself that question so constantly, and I don't like doing that. So I try and make sure that others who come after me find things in a more understandable state than when I found them.
With that, so good organization and maintenance of all the stuff is really necessary.
Yeah. And so other things that are standard for any project, we're going to need to have test suites for a lot of our code to try and get up as much of our code coverage as possible. My personal target is to have above 90% code coverage. Now, there's a lot of different ways of handling how you want to implement tests. A way that I constantly hear about that nobody ever does is build the tests as you go for each element. So if, say, you build a part of the application that's going to be for sign in, after you build that, then you make the tests for it. So that way you can know, it's like, hey, we're meeting our objectives for this. All the elements are working as intended. And while that would be optimal, the test is also a great way to slow development to a crawl. So what I would figure is that we can set up the test suites a lot closer towards the end of the project, as long as we guarantee set up our time to do so, so our tests do exist there. But at some point, we are going to want to make sure our tests are being built, executed, and run, and our targets to get over 90% coverage for our application. So that way we know that things work, and that when we try and run it, like if we make an update, our tests will catch if our change broke something. Tests are incredibly important, and there's different types as well. So there are full integration tests. There are just individual element tests. There's all kinds of different things that we can do, and that's stuff that we can cover, especially once we get the rest of the technical team together. It's a lot of different considerations. This is just the first stuff I can get together. We've got stuff about what type of database that we would want to use. That's part of the architectural decisions that will impact us greatly in the future. There are massive differences between a SQL and NoSQL database, and how those are used, how data is managed. We'd already talked about our passwords. The size of the instance, that's something that's an easy thing. Instances on AWS range in size from small, which has like, it's a glorified toaster, to like large and extra large instances for if you want a lot of processing power. we're generally going to err on the side of giving ourselves a lot of processing power because we'll need it. So
I don't
um,
think I understand most of like all. I know the terms which you
yeah,
talked about, but I think engineering team would be will be at the better position to ask questions
yeah,
on that. And we definitely
yeah.
need to
So
scope the deliverables, what the final expectation will be from us.
yeah.
We
So
have the
we'll be able to finalize a lot of that with Bennett tomorrow on what our final expectation is. I know Bennett only set aside an hour for it. I feel like he didn't give enough time for the kind of meeting we'll be needing, but at least we'll cover what he needs to cover. If he needs to go, cool. I'll stick around as long as necessary for discussions tomorrow from that meeting. So if it runs over, I'm absolutely free. If people need to drop or leave or what have you, so it goes. Life is never easy. People have lots of meetings. They've got their own other classes to take care of, and we'll
Friday.
deal.
No one is in the mood to work on Friday.
Yeah. So, yeah, so we've covered our Figma boards, we've covered Jira. Proposed change, he'd like to send it in tomorrow. Okay, so I've got something I need to read over as soon as we're done. And then we covered our GitHub repository, which I think I changed to a Figma board. Okay, cool. So yeah, anything else technical wise or alternative questions that I might be able to help potentially?
No, right now. Yeah, I have like one last question. From
Cool.
these three tools, I'm done. I don't have any other questions. I have like the set of agenda points I have ready with me for tomorrow's call. Apart from this, I have like one assignment on me, which I need to do in terms of creating the organizational chart for our team. So I was just wanting to confirm with you that you shared three contacts with me to add to Slack channel. Are those three members only with the team? Because I need to create an hierarchy for us.
Okay, so if
Organization.
we're gonna do hierarchy, I would say Bennett would be at the top,
Okay.
then we'd have Mayank after,
Hmm.
then me, and then however you guys want to have it sorted, I guess.
Okay.
So Bennett's the ultimate person we want to make happy. Mayank would review essentially everything I do,
Hmm.
and then I review you guys. So because I know Mayank is really good at what he does, but he's also incredibly busy. So there is a fair amount of trust he does give to me, but at the same time, um, I'm going to be having a lot of stuff that if I am unsure about something or if I need to confirm something, I would get with him and have verifications done that way as well.
Yeah, sounds great. So this was my idea also. It was quite similar. So
Yeah.
yeah, no other team member, right? So only these.
None that I'm currently tracking, but we could do a follow-up with Bennett tomorrow just to make sure we're not missing anybody. I don't know how the CMU staff falls into any of this or anything else. I only know what our internal Slack side of things is here.
Yeah.
So if there's additional people involved outside that I don't know about, there might be DOE people or something that's well outside of my knowledge scope. So
Got it.
Bennett
I
probably
think I
knows
can
of
be
other
good with
people.
this detail for the assignment point of view. I
Yeah,
think the meeting should be good.
cool. Alrighty.
Anything else you want me to discuss? I am good with my part.
I feel like I've covered everything I'd planned to cover. We can stop sharing so you don't have to see the thousands of tabs I've got of just stuff. Um,
I'll stop the recording also.